Everybody, it's David. Welcome to MSOM 601. Lesson 2, I am in the process of grading Lesson 2 and want to take a little bit of a break here and give you some of my thoughts on the things that I am seeing. I'm coming to you today from Fredericksburg, Texas, from the Magnolia House Bed and Breakfast. Fredericksburg is in the hill country of Texas. It's sort of right smack dab in the middle of the hill country of Texas, and just a lovely, lovely place. I don't know if you all are aware of this, if I mentioned it maybe in our welcome calls or not, but my wife and I, after I got out of the corporate world, we bought an 18-room boutique hotel and fine dining restaurant north of Seattle and started a hospitality management consulting company called In Connections. And In Connections is still alive and well today. My wife pretty much runs it. But what she does is she does quality assurance work for hospitality properties across the country, mainly focused on the state of Washington. She does some in Texas. But she also does something that's really kind of cool. It's called interim in-sitting. I'm not sure if any of you have ever been to a bed and breakfast or a small country inn that's run by owner-operators, but if you have, you may have wondered, what do these people do to take a vacation? Do they just close down, or do they do something else? Well, what many of them do is they hire people like my wife to come in and run their property for them while they're gone. And so Jill is down here this week at the Magnolia House while the owners are taking a 2-week vacation, and I get to tag along and try not to get in the way. And so she will run the property, manage the staff, take reservations. I actually get to cook breakfast today. That's part of what I do sometimes whenever I've got a chance here at the bed and breakfast. So just another interesting, hopefully, interesting story. So let's enough of that stuff. Let's talk about the grading this week and some of my observations. Discussion boards continue to be important, and I just want to remind everyone of the Friday first post. So I know this week was a little bit of a challenge, particularly in the Charleston and the Carolinas because of the tropical storm and everything else. So just make sure that your first post on the discussion boards is in by Friday. One of the other things that I did this week is posted some information in the announcements about making your sources work hard for you. And that will apply not only to your papers, but also to your discussion board comments as well. So make sure that you look at that in the announcements section. For many of you, I talked to you in our initial telephone calls about some of my philosophies, kind of a 3-step process, if you will, for discussion boards. And hopefully some of you are beginning to employ that type of technique. And what I mean by that is I always will pose a question for you on the discussion boards. And so if I were on your side of the fence, or if I were in your shoes, the way that I would approach that is I would approach it in a 3-step process. The first thing is I would post my idea, my theory, my response to the question that the professor has posed. And then next, the step 2 is you support it. So you support your idea, your theory, your answer to the professor's question with support from your research that you found, hopefully, at the CSU Online Library. And then step 3 is application. An application would mean that you would provide some examples or some additional ideas to bring it to life, to bring your theory that is supported to life. And so the 3-step process is really idea, or theory, support, and then application. Idea, support, application. Idea, support, application. And so if you begin to think about discussion boards in that way from a 3-step process, hopefully that'll help you get some rhythm, if you will, to your discussion board posts. Okay? Thinking styles this week. One of the key things I'm already seeing as I'm grading the thinking styles, both your personal ones and then the ones with the characters in Amina's story, is how important it is to understand definitions, okay? And you're going to hear this from me in the courses that I teach, because today definitions matter. I may have a definition for a particular term that may be wildly different than yours, but if I don't tell you what that definition is very early on in either our conversation or our paper, then you're going to use the lens through which you view that definition as you read my paper, and it could be totally, totally different. And so this week I'm going to use a couple of examples because I've had some comments that I've made to students on their papers about the definition of timely, for example. Some of you may have gotten timely as one of your critical thinking assessment results. And so if you simply think of timely as meaning on time, then you've missed the total point that Chartrand and the rest of the authors have in that book. So timely doesn't just mean on time. The way they define it is it means efficient, reliable, responsive. And so if you get the timely result and you go, hold it, I send stuff in late, I'm late with stuff, that is not necessarily the definition that Chartrand and the other authors have been talking about. So you need to clearly understand what that definition is before you begin to say, that's not me or that is me. Okay? Another example this week was open-minded. Open-minded is something today that people will say, oh, that means tolerant, that means you're just all over the map, and so on and so on. Well, open-minded, according to the authors in this, means that individual or individuals value fairness and they think problems through. Now, that's a little bit different definition than simply being open to all ideas, right? And so if you get the result on the assessment that says you're open-minded and you're going, nah, I'm pretty analytical about stuff, make sure that you read the definition that's in there before you do that. And certainly the application that you have in your papers going forward. I'm going to ask you in a lesson coming up that talks about persuasion. It'll talk about sympathy. It'll talk about a bunch of other areas like that. You need to make sure before you go into an application that you clearly define the term that you're going to be using. And so you'll see on your papers coming up, I'll use this phrase a lot. Trust me, a lot. Define, then apply. And so very early on in your papers, you need to make sure that your terms are defined so that the reader has a full understanding of how you're approaching the topic, or they may miss your point totally because their definition for a particular term is different. Okay? So that's a little bit about thinking styles. And honestly, this is a real exercise in critical thinking because one of the key things that you have to understand in critical thinking is the definition. And so it's the definition of the term, the definition of the ideas that you're going for. I've had, and this is, trust me, I've learned this over many years. I'm trying to still learn it over many years. Many times someone will throw something out and my overall definition of that term will take over and I'll just go crazy. Versus the first question I should ask is, well, how do you define that? So that I understand the context with which they're bringing it forward, okay? Let's talk a little bit about citations and references. Always make sure in this class that you cite the book, Now You're Thinking, the ebook, one of the 13 ebooks in the big ebook. Always make sure that you cite that book when you're referencing or discussing Amina in Amina's story. You need to make sure you do that every single time, okay? One of the big challenges I'm noticing in the first week about APA is using websites. And so I would encourage you to make sure that you look at the APA ebook or go to the Purdue OWL website to see how you cite a website and how you reference a website when you use it, all right? That's one of the biggest things that you're going to be doing, so make sure you start to get that right as you go through. I'll start correcting some of those right now. I'm just noting them, and I want you to go to the site and find the answers versus me always giving you the answers on those, okay? If you need some additional help on that, go back to the Lesson 1 videos on APA because I do discuss some of those in the videos that I've provided on APA from Lesson 1, okay? And then finally, I'm going to beat this one every week. Make sure that you take a look at my announcements. I added 2 or 3 in the middle of the week this past week. And so every single time you log into the course, make sure that you look at the announcements to see if perhaps there's a new one in there that you haven't seen yet. This past week, as I mentioned already, I added one on making your sources work harder for you. I added one in the middle of the week on the strategic thinking pyramid that hopefully will be helpful. Again, I add those at any given point in time. And so it may be a Wednesday on something that you're working on that week, and there'll be a new announcement in there that may help you as you're writing your paper or doing your discussion boards going forward. Okay? Hopefully this was helpful. I'll have most of the grading done by tomorrow, which is Tuesday. And if you have any questions, make sure you give me a call. All right? Study hard. Chat with you soon.